Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to be going over the basic functions of the Minimus Maximus module by Count Modula. This is going to be video 1 in a multi-part series, so in later videos I'll be discussing some of the more advanced techniques that I've used with this module in my patching. Alright, so we have 4 inputs on the left-hand side. Inputs A through C all function the same. Input D is a little bit special, so we'll save that one for later. On the right-hand side, we have 8 gate outputs, which again, we'll talk about later. We have a bipolar function, a bias knob, and an on switch for the bias knob. Again, we'll save these for later. What we'll actually start talking about are the 3 outputs at the bottom here. So we have a maximum output, a minimum output, and a mean output. Maximum is very straightforward. Whatever values you input on the left-hand side here, whichever one is the highest or the maximum, is what you'll see coming out of that output. So if 1 is the maximum, you'll see 1 coming out of the maximum. If I input 2, you'll see that at the maximum. And same thing if I input 3. Next, we can talk about the minimum output, which basically functions the same as the maximum output, just in reverse. So whatever your lowest value is what you'll see coming out of the minimum output. In this case, it's currently 1. If I turn this trigger off, it's actually going to be sending 0, so we'll see 0 on the scope. All right, next we'll be talking about the mean output. Now, if you're like me and most of the math that you do involves counting to 4, just a quick refresher on what mean is. Basically, you're going to take the total input value and divide it by the number of inputs. So currently we have 2 inputs, and if I send 1 volt, you would have 1 volt divided by 2, so a value of 0.5. I send 2 more volts for a total of 3 volts. You would have 3 divided by 2, so 1.5. Next, we can talk about the gate outputs. This is pretty straightforward. If you look at input A, right now it is the maximum value being sent to the module. So we're going to get a gate out of the maximum output. If I send 2 volts here to input B, input A would now become the minimum value being sent. So you'll get a gate out of the minimum. By default, these are gates from 0 to 10 volts. If you click the bipolar switch, you will get -5 to +5 volts. Okay, we can finally talk about input D here. So I'm going to repatch input C and input D. So as it's wired currently, this is just going to function like inputs A through C. So if I send 4 volts into input D and come back over here and look at the maximum, you're going to see 4 volts at the maximum. Where it gets a little more complicated is when we start talking about this bias knob. With input into input D, this bias knob is going to be bypassed. But if I disconnect input D, basically the bias is going to be treated as an input into input D. The bias knob ranges from +5 volts to -5. So right now it's acting like 5 volts is the maximum value being input. Conversely, if I bring this down to -5 and then look at the minimum, you'll see -5 there. When we start using bias and the mean output, we have one more thing to think about. So you would look at this, you'd see that I'm sending a total of 6 volts. So you would think 6 volts divided by 3 should give you a value of 2, but because bias is on, we have 6 divided by 4 inputs. And then you'll see as I change the bias value, that is going to change the output. I'll see you all in the next video, and happy patching until then. Bye.